But I do think one thing that really irks me on the left, and I don't really have a lot of faith in the right, so you tend to criticize the people that you line up more, that you care more about, and that would be the Democrats for me. People lost trust in them because the voters were saying there was a concern. There were people across the board saying they had a concern. And the Democrats said, no, over here, look over here. They told the voters what to care about, and they did not listen when the voters said they cared. So these stories come out aren't about beating a dead horse. It's saying if they could have a fair conversation that we heard you, we saw it as they saw it, they'd be gaining some of the voters back to say, okay, we're not going to keep saying that.
Like any other morning at The View, the panel was sitting around the table, ready to quarrel, joke, and fight. But this time, everything collapsed extremely quickly. What should have been a peaceful conversation on the 2024 election suddenly exploded as the unsaid topic was finally brought up.
I think that I want to move on from why the Democratic Party lost, and I want to hear from the Democratic Party about how we are going to take our country back and how what they're going to do to combat fascism and what they're going to do to stop the Medicaid cuts that are going on, to stop giving tax cuts to billionaires, to stop taking federal workers' pensions away, to stop taking federal jobs away, to stop taking education away, to stop attacking our institutions, to stopping, why is this Trump administration stopping medical research, cancer? I want to talk about why this administration is giving refugee status to South African white Afrikaners as opposed to Afghans and Italians and people of color.
The moment his cognitive health was mentioned, the mood in the studio changed. Biden's focus was diverted, tensions increased, and facial expressions stiffened. The subject of what the Democratic Party was allegedly concealing was raised. Some hosts fiercely opposed it, while others tried to dismiss it as a useless diversion.
7% of Americans in 2023 said Joe Biden was too old to run again. And they were told, sit down, shut up, he is the nominee. And then when it became untenable and he stepped aside, they anointed Kamala Harris. There was not a primary, there was not a democratic process. And then when she lost, they said, don't look backward, we're moving forward, we're going to talk about why we didn't listen to you. We had Joe Biden here last week. It was an honor to have him. I think he is a good man. I do not think he could have been president for 4 more years. The hardest job on the planet.
Can this guy be president?
He was elected. I didn't vote for it.
But he also, President Biden took responsibility at this table, which is something that I'm frustrated with the Democrats. He said,
he did take
this falls on me. And I said that was the clearest answer of what people need.
She thought that for 4 years in a succession, the public had been duped by party leadership, the media, and those responsible for upholding democracy. Before we proceed, kindly remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We can grow and give you more engaging stories with your assistance.
In this book, it's saying they would be boxed out of meetings if they raise concerns. And there's very specific examples. George Clooney goes on the record to Jake Tapper and says he moved mountains. He flew in from Italy to do this record fundraiser for Joe Biden. Joe Biden didn't recognize George Clooney. One of the most recognizable men on the planet. And now that's not a presidential duty. It's not the job. You don't have to recognize George Clooney. But does that give you confidence that in the middle of the night, if China's about to attack us, there's a war breaking out in Iran, that he is the sharpest person to be able to handle that?
Which administration texted war plans to their brother?
It's just like, do we just keep lowering the bar because Trump is bad? Nothing else is bad because Trump is bad?
The ship has sailed. It's out in the ocean somewhere with Biden.
We have Trump because you guys screwed this up. All right.
What started as a sharp exchange quickly became a tense televised confrontation that laid bare just how deep the political divide has grown, with Sarah leading the pushback and making no attempt to hide her anger toward the Democratic Party for ignoring the concerns of its own supporters. She argued that Democrats, independents, and moderates alike had been raising red flags about Biden, yet party leaders chose silence and distraction instead of honesty, urging the public to look elsewhere rather than acknowledge what was plainly visible. Sarah stressed this was never about personal attacks, but about facts and accountability, noting that admitting reality could have preserved trust and helped rebuild connections with voters, but instead the party insisted everything was fine and treated critics as if they were imagining problems. This, she said, wasn't a one-time error, but a recurring pattern of a party obsessed with control and image.
I mean, really, Trump lied to people. I think that's why we.
He won more votes. That is a fact.
I think he lied to his base. I think he told his base that they were going to their overtime would not be taxed. That was a lie.
Actually, that's in the new tax bill. It's literally in the tax bill.
They had to fight to put that in. They had to fight to put that back in. He had every intention of taking away that.
That's not true. He ran on no tax incentives. It's in the tax bill.
Yeah, but it wasn't in it originally. I also think that a lot of people are, and Swazi pointed it out that it wasn't in there. I think the other thing that people need to realize is that they were lied to. The federal workers that voted for him, farmers that voted for him, immigrants that voted for him, they were lied to. That is why we have Trump, not because of any other driving.
While forgetting who gave it power. Once these points were raised on air, the mood in the room shifted instantly. Producers appeared uneasy, and the conversation took a far more serious turn as claims surfaced about what had supposedly been happening behind closed doors for years. The panel suggested Biden was no longer simply an aging president with memory lapses, but someone without real authority, accusing party leaders like Pelosi, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and even Barack Obama of knowing about his mental struggles and allowing it to continue. They questioned whether Biden truly understood the laws he signed, the agreements he approved, or the global meetings he attended, arguing this went beyond political drama and signaled a presidency unraveling. The discussion also highlighted how Biden, once opposed to positions like gay marriage and school integration, was suddenly presented as a symbol of progressive change, a shift the panel attributed to the party rather than to him, portraying him as a figurehead used to advance agendas he hadn't originally supported. Even symbolic gestures such as pride flags at the White House were described as performance rather than meaningful progress, reinforcing the claim that the real Joe Biden had been sidelined emotionally, mentally, and politically by design. The most troubling claim focused on global consequences, with the panel asserting that while American media insisted Biden was at his best, foreign leaders were unconvinced, arguing that figures like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping saw through prepared speeches and brief appearances and acted accordingly, leaving the world not just changed under Biden's leadership, but more unstable. Russia moved against Ukraine, China grew more confrontational toward Taiwan, and Iran became bolder while encouraging attacks on Israel. And the panel argued these developments were not random. The claim was that hostile governments noticed weakness in a confused American president and chose that moment to act because while television audiences might be managed, world leaders were not fooled. Biden's pauses, missteps, and unfinished thoughts were seen everywhere, and foreign powers took note. The constant exchanges on The View pointed to the idea that the timing of this global unrest was no accident, and that the Democratic Party's refusal to face reality played a direct role, with the argument being that keeping Biden in office harmed not only the United States, but also global stability. Framed that way, the discussion became bigger than winning or losing an election, turning into a matter of real consequences affecting real lives. Yet, some hosts, particularly Sunny, appeared eager to move past the issue entirely, shifting the focus to a checklist of Democratic priorities like education, opposing fascism, protecting Medicaid, and preserving pensions, none of which directly addressed the accusations being raised. This disconnect made it feel as though two separate conversations were happening at once, with Alyssa and Sarah pressing for honesty and accountability, while Sunny leaned on familiar talking points and acted as though the past 4 years didn't need serious review. Her attempt to introduce race by mentioning white immigrants from South Africa and Ukraine only deepened the frustration, coming across not as a sidetrack, but as outright refusal to engage. Sunny offered no new policies or leadership ideas, instead urging protests and confrontation, which Alyssa countered by pointing out that marching, chanting, and constant outrage had already been tried without fixing the core problem. And that's when the exchange tipped into open hostility. The shouting, the staged outrage, the accusations, it all came pouring out, and yet the result was the same. They still lost, leaving behind an uneasy moment where things took a sharper edge. Alyssa argued that Sunny's final suggestion sounded less like a real plan and more like disorder, not because it would succeed, but because it spared Democrats from admitting their own mistakes. She said they couldn't bring themselves to admit they had been wrong, that they had misled people, or that they weren't as morally flawless as they claimed. So instead of saying, "We chose the wrong person," they blamed voters, labeling them ignorant, hateful, or dishonest because that was easier than owning up to 4 years of deception while the country struggled. That's when Alyssa stopped holding back and said what no one else wanted to say out loud, stating plainly that Joe Biden was not mentally fit to serve as president, a comment that instantly froze the room. She insisted she wasn't attacking, but sharing facts, reminding everyone that in 2023, a large majority of Americans believe Biden was too old to run again, and that those Americans weren't all Republicans, even though the party shut down any real conversation, avoided a fair primary, and handed Biden the nomination anyway. When that position became harder to defend, she claimed leaders quietly tried to shift power to Kamala Harris without a proper democratic process, a move Sunny brushed off as acceptable, showing no concern for justification or democratic norms. Alyssa went on to say that Biden had appeared on the show just a week earlier, and while she didn't support him, she wanted to see accountability. His brief admission of responsibility, she argued, couldn't erase years of concealment or the refusal to admit failure, a point Sunny reinforced by refusing to say, "We got it wrong." Then Alyssa shared a moment that stunned the audience, recalling how Biden failed to recognize George Clooney at a major fundraiser, not as a celebrity test, but as a sign of concern, questioning how someone who struggled in a calm setting would respond to a crisis call in the middle of the night. Alyssa cautioned that ignoring reality again could lead to another hard reckoning, then pointed to Biden's interview on The View, where she asked him directly about concerns over his mental fitness, only for him to freeze, lose his place, and have Jill Biden answer for him, which she said felt less like support and more like protection. In that moment, critics felt confirmed, seeing a president unable to handle even basic questioning, which Alyssa described as one of the most troubling political cover-ups in modern American history, arguing that Biden wasn't truly leading and that unelected insiders knew it and accepted the cost anyway, before closing by inviting viewers to like, subscribe, and share their thoughts.